Anxiety is a silent pain that almost everyone must face in life, not loud, but quietly gnawing at every breath and every thought, making the mind feel heavy as if locked inside a dark room with no exit. At times, we believe that if we achieve something, if we gain recognition, or if circumstances change, we will finally be at peace. Yet the moment these things arrive, anxiety returns in another form, more subtle and persistent. This room has no visible bars, no tangible chains, but it locks our hearts with layers of fear, confusion, and helplessness. That is why many describe anxiety as a prison without a door. Yet the Buddha taught that the door has never been locked and the key has always remained in our hands. The essential question is not how to break the walls outside, but how to look deeply within and realize that we are already free. This key does not take us out of life, nor does it erase all challenges or suffering, but it opens a new vision, the freedom found right within suffering itself. When we see that anxiety is not destiny, but only a state of the mind, we begin to glimpse the path beyond its invisible chains. That path is mindfulness. Mindfulness helps us return to the present, to see clearly that anxiety is not our essence, but only a wave rising within the ocean of mind. The wave may be strong, even fierce, yet it too dissolves, while the ocean remains vast and still. If we pause, breathe, and observe anxiety as it is, we will see it change and pass, unable to bind us forever. The silent pain of anxiety becomes a bell of awakening, reminding us to come home and to realize that the door has never been closed. In stillness and awareness, we discover the key to freedom and recognize that we never lost it. We only forgot that it has always been in our hands. In life, suffering is something no one can avoid. Like the first arrow the Buddha described, it is the inevitable wound of being human. Illness, loss, separation, failure, change. This arrow strikes suddenly, bringing pain and leaving scars upon the heart. But it is a natural part of existence. No one, whether wealthy or poor, strong or fragile, can walk through life without ever being struck by it. Yet there is a second arrow, more dangerous and persistent, which is the way we react to the first wound. When suffering comes, instead of accepting it as part of life, we shoot ourselves with another arrow. Through resistance, blame, fear, and self-judgment. We tell ourselves we should not be hurting, that we must be stronger, that life should not have turned out this way. These thoughts multiply the wound of the first arrow, making it far heavier to bear. The second arrow lingers, turning into anxiety, into a constant fear, into a restless mind that cannot rest in the present. The Buddha taught that while we cannot avoid the first arrow, we can choose not to shoot the second. This requires mindfulness to see clearly that our reaction is not destiny. When we pause, take a deep breath, and observe the emotion without rushing to resist it, we realize the second arrow is only a choice, not an inevitable truth. And when we no longer wound ourselves again, the original pain begins to soften. The heart feels lighter, and we are freed from the extra burden of suffering we once created for ourselves.
The deep root of anxiety does not lie in external events, but in the way our mind clings and craves. The Buddha called this craving and clinging two flames that keep restlessness alive. When the mind longs for absolute stability in a world that is always changing, when we try to hold on tightly to something to feel safe, that is when the seed of anxiety is planted. We fear losing loved ones, fear failure, fear aging and death, fear an uncertain future. All of these fears arise from the wish to preserve things forever, while the very nature of life is impermanence. It is like trying to grasp water in our hands. The tighter we hold, the more it slips through our fingers, and the greater our unease grows. Anxiety is like a fire burning inside the house, not because the wind outside has blown in, but because we keep fueling it with craving and attachment. When we believe happiness can only exist if everything stays the same, we build for ourselves an invisible cage, and every shift in life becomes a threat. But when we reflect with wisdom, we see that nothing can remain unchanged, and change itself is the breath of life. If we loosen our grip, learning to flow with impermanence instead of resisting it, we will see that anxiety has no ground to stand on. In that moment, instead of fear, we feel openness, a quiet confidence that we can walk steadily through any circumstance, because we no longer demand absolute safety from a world that was never meant to be fixed.
One of the most subtle roots of anxiety is the illusion of self. From childhood, we are taught to build an image of ourselves, to be strong, successful, admired, never to make mistakes. We construct an idea of a perfect self and pour all our energy into defending it. Yet life does not unfold according to our design, and whenever reality does not match the image we have created, anxiety appears like a shadow threatening us. In failure, we fear others will see our flaws. In sorrow, we worry that we are weak. Under judgment, we feel our self-image crumble. The more we try to protect this self, the more weary we become, and anxiety does not relent. The Buddha taught the truth of non-self as a liberation, that there is no fixed, unchanging me that we must carry. We are not the roles or the expectations or the labels imposed by society or by ourselves. We are a continuous flow of body and mind, changing moment by moment. When we realize this, the burden falls away.
anxiety loses its ground, for there is no false image left to defend. Instead of fearing the collapse of a perfect self, we begin to find freedom in imperfection, accepting that we are always an unfolding process, never confined to a rigid mold. In the vision of non-self, anxiety becomes an invitation to let go, to rest more lightly with ourselves, and to move through life with greater ease.
In the Buddha's teachings, there are 5 hindrances regarded as clouds covering the sky of the mind, preventing us from seeing truth clearly and from resting in stillness. Among them, 2 in particular mirror the very state of anxiety: restlessness and remorse, and doubt. Restlessness and remorse describe the mind's unease, always unsettled, leaping from memory to plan, from regret over the past to worry about the future. It is the mind that never sits still, like a monkey swinging from branch to branch, echoing within us endless blame and imagined scenarios. Anxiety is the clearest expression of this hindrance, as we regret what has passed and fear what has yet to come, unable to touch the peace of the present. Doubt, vikikicha, is the sense of uncertainty, of insecurity, the loss of confidence in the very path we walk. This is not the healthy questioning that leads to wisdom, but a paralyzing suspicion that keeps us from moving forward, keeps us from trusting in our own capacity. Anxiety often binds itself to this feeling, as if we are always standing on a trembling bridge, never able to place our feet firmly. When these 2 hindrances dominate the mind, anxiety becomes a cycle, draining our strength and clouding our clarity. Yet the Buddha did not see them as permanent traits of human nature. He showed that through mindfulness and meditation, we can recognize them, observe them without identification. When we see clearly that restlessness, remorse, and doubt are only passing states, not me, they begin to dissolve. Like dark clouds drifting away to reveal the sky that was always clear, the mind returns to stillness once it is no longer imprisoned by these hindrances.
In the Buddha's teaching, suffering is not merely understood as moments of misfortune, but is seen more profoundly in 3 distinct forms, known as the 3 types of dukkha. The first is dukkha dukkha, the direct suffering that is obvious and unavoidable. This is illness, poverty, loss, separation, pains so clear that they make our hearts bleed and our eyes shed tears. This is the first arrow that every human must face. The second is viparinama dukkha, the suffering of change. Even while enjoying happiness, the fear that it may vanish creeps silently into the heart. A beautiful love, a peaceful family, a stable job, all can change at any moment, and that very possibility sows the seed of unease. At times, the fear of losing can hurt us even more than the actual loss itself. The third is sankhara dukkha, the most subtle and difficult to recognize. Even in moments of joy, there remains a vague sense of incompleteness, a subtle emptiness. One may have comfort, love, and fame, yet deep within still feels something missing.
This subtle suffering arises from the impermanent and selfless nature of all phenomena. For everything depends on conditions and therefore can never bring absolute satisfaction. By understanding these three forms of dukkha, we realize that suffering is not a sign of failure, but the natural fabric of existence. Instead of running from it or resenting it, we can learn to smile at it, for it is through the right understanding of suffering that the path to liberation unfolds.
From the perspective of the Dharma, anxiety is not a random phenomenon that arises and disappears without cause, but the result of a chain of conditions operating under dependent origination. When an object meets the senses or the mind, this is called contact, phassa. From contact arises feeling, vedana, which may be pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. If mindfulness is absent, craving, tanha, quickly follows, the urge to cling to pleasure or to push away pain. Craving leads to clinging, upadana, the act of grasping tightly. From clinging arises becoming, the formation of a new mental state, as if we begin to define ourselves through that feeling. I am an anxious person. Becoming then leads to birth, followed by aging and death, not only in the literal sense, but in the repeated cycle of anxiety being born, aging, and dying within us. This circle not only describes existence itself, but also the way anxiety is sustained and reborn moment by moment. Each time we react to a feeling with grasping or resistance, we add another link to keep the cycle spinning. The Buddha taught that when we see this clearly, we can stop it. At the moment of feeling, if we observe with mindfulness instead of rushing to react, craving does not arise, clinging does not arise, and the chain is cut. Without fuel, anxiety gradually dissolves, leaving space for inner stillness. Understanding dependent origination is not merely a philosophical concept, but a map showing us the structure of anxiety and where to find release at its very root.
One of the most important gateways to freedom from anxiety is the contemplation of impermanence. The Buddha taught that all phenomena arise and pass away. Nothing lasts forever, and anxiety is no exception. When a wave of anxiety arises, we often feel as though it will weigh us down forever, that we will never escape it. This mistaken belief makes us despair and resist even more. But when we look deeply, we see that anxiety is only a wave in the ocean of mind. It arises and then fades with no fixed essence. Recognizing its temporary nature brings relief, because we no longer fight a battle against something we imagine to be eternal. Instead of fearing, we can learn to observe it as we would a cloud drifting across the sky, knowing that the cloud will come and go while the sky remains vast and open. When we stop clinging to the thought that anxiety is me, we see clearly that it is only a phenomenon arising and passing according to conditions, without the power to bind our true nature. Each time we slow the breath, we remind ourselves, this state, too, shall pass. That trust opens space within the mind, a place where we can stand still, witnessing change and discovering peace within that very process. Impermanence is not a shallow comfort, but a profound truth that frees us from clinging to fleeting emotions, allowing us to live more lightly and more freely.
In modern psychology, there is a concept known as the hedonic treadmill, the wheel of pleasure, describing how human beings endlessly pursue new goals in the hope of finding lasting happiness. When we achieve something, we may feel relief and satisfaction for a moment, but that joy quickly fades, and the mind immediately sets up a new target. We keep running, yet never reach the eternal peace we long for. Strangely enough, this mirrors exactly the Buddha's teaching from more than 2,000 years ago. He called it craving, the root that keeps suffering alive. Anxiety arises within this treadmill because we keep believing that happiness lies in the next goal, in some external condition, instead of realizing that true peace is rooted in the stillness of the mind. It is like a thirsty person drinking salt water. The more they drink, the thirstier they become. The more we chase new desires, the greater our anxiety grows. When one success fails to bring us peace, we fear losing it and then pin our hopes on the next. This cycle becomes fertile ground where anxiety is reborn again and again. The Buddha showed that freedom does not come from running faster on this wheel, but from stepping off, recognizing the impermanent and unsatisfactory nature of everything we crave. When the mind learns to rest in the present, when happiness is no longer tied to conditions beyond our control, anxiety truly begins to dissolve, giving way to a peace that is steady and unshakable from within.
The Buddha did not stop at revealing the nature of anxiety. He also gave us a practical path to transform it at its root, known as the Noble Eightfold Path. This path is not a rigid doctrine, but a complete way of living, harmoniously combining wisdom, ethics, and mental training. First comes wisdom, beginning with right view and right intention. Right view helps us see clearly that anxiety is not a fixed essence, but a conditioned phenomenon arising and passing away. Right intention guides us away from fearful, blaming, or clinging thoughts and turns us toward compassion, forgiveness, and letting go. Next is the foundation of ethics, which includes right speech, right action, and right livelihood. When we speak truthfully and kindly, act in ways that do not harm, and sustain ourselves through honest livelihood, life naturally becomes lighter and clearer, leaving anxiety with no ground to cling to. Finally comes the cultivation of the mind, with right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Right effort is the steady work of nurturing wholesome seeds and abandoning
unwholesome habits. Right mindfulness is the ability to return to the present, to recognize anxiety without being swept away by it. Right concentration is deep stability, a mind resting like a still lake that reflects all things yet remains undisturbed. When these three dimensions flow together, we not only ease temporary waves of anxiety, but transform the very way the mind meets life. The Noble Eightfold Path does not promise a life without challenges, but it opens a state of freedom where we can walk through suffering without being drowned by it, and where true peace can be discovered in every step.
Mindfulness is the wondrous key that allows us to recognize anxiety without being controlled by it. In practicing mindfulness, we return to observe four foundations: body, feeling, mind, and phenomena. Observing the body means noticing whether the breath is fast or slow, whether the chest is tightening or relaxing. Observing feeling means recognizing whether a sensation is pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, without labeling or judgment. Observing the mind means looking directly at the restless, worried, or unsettled state, but seeing it only as a witness, without calling it me. Finally, observing phenomena means realizing that anxiety is simply a conditioned event, arising and passing away according to causes, without an independent self we must fear. Practicing in this way, anxiety gradually reveals its true form, a passing cloud in the sky of the mind, not the entire sky itself. If we cling to it, we feel we are anxiety. But if we simply observe, we see it come and go, while the nature of the mind remains vast and clear. Mindfulness does not ask us to push anxiety away, but teaches us to step out of the habit of identifying with it. When each breath becomes a refuge, when every moment is illuminated by awareness, anxiety loses its power, turning into a lesson rather than a sentence. In the light of mindfulness, we see clearly that we are larger than anxiety, wider than any emotion, and from there we discover peace in the very midst of inner storms.
Concentration, or samadhi, is the deep resting of the mind, where stillness becomes the ground upon which wisdom naturally arises. The Buddha compared the settled mind to a still lake. Its clear surface reflects everything, from the blue sky to the gathering clouds, yet the water itself does not stir. In the same way, when the mind is steady, we can see clearly all things and emotions, including anxiety, without being swept away. In daily life, we often let the mind be carried off by thoughts, fears, or desires, making unease grow stronger. But when we cultivate concentration, the mind becomes firm, no longer chasing after each passing wave of emotion. Anxiety may still arise, but it appears only as a small ripple on the surface, unable to disturb the deeper stillness beneath. The power of concentration is not in erasing circumstances or suppressing feelings, but in enabling us to stand firm within them, like a great tree unmoved by the wind.
In this stability, we can look at our worries with clarity, seeing them as temporary phenomena that naturally fade away. Concentration also nourishes a quiet confidence, reminding us that we need not fear life's uncertainty, for we have found refuge within our own mind. When the mind reaches the clarity of samadhi, anxiety no longer rules, and peace becomes a living reality in each breath, each step.
Liberation in the Buddhist teaching is not a state where anxiety never arises, but the awakening to stop shooting the second arrow into ourselves. Anxiety is part of human life. It will still appear when we face change, loss, or uncertainty. Yet what makes this pain heavy is our reaction, resisting, blaming, judging, and criticizing ourselves for being anxious. Each time we do so, we double the wound, turning a small wave into a raging storm. The Buddha taught that the first arrow, the inevitable difficulties of life, cannot be avoided, but the second arrow, the resistance and self-inflicted pain, can be released. When we learn to stop fighting with ourselves, the heart opens into a new space where peace can appear right within the uncertainty of life. Letting go does not mean giving up or being passive, but no longer clinging to the illusion of controlling everything. We still live wholeheartedly, still make effort, but without being chained to outcomes, without treating anxiety as an enemy to be destroyed. In this way, each wave of anxiety becomes a reminder to return to the breath, to the present moment, and to see that here and now we are safe, we are enough, we can still smile. Freedom, therefore, is not found in erasing every fluctuation, but in the ability to stand firm within them, without allowing the mind to be bound. It is a peace not dependent on conditions, not tied to the perfection of the outside world, but blossoming from the heart of release. When we accept ourselves with all our imperfections, when we stop shooting the second arrow, we realize peace has never left us. It was only waiting for us to come home. This is true freedom, a freedom gentle yet steady, like a mountain in the wind, a freedom we can carry in each breath and every step through life.